Happy Brady's never going to retire day, right? What's up with that? I mean, you knew that was coming. But part two, it's opening a restaurant right for you, the nitty gritty. So Elena, who is our moderator, is gonna, I think she's having a little technical difficulty today, so I'll drive the bus a bit. All right, gang. So last week we talked about your concept and we shared some forms for everyone to use. So if you remember, I'm opening a vegan taco and coconut macaroon cafe. So I did my work, my homework with that vein, right? With that concept, but I realized that I can't do vegan because, you know, cheese is life. So I've modified my vision, which is part of the process, right? To a vegetarian taco and macaroon cafe called Say Tacoco. So in this original 4-part grid, which is part of the vision work we did last week, space and inspiration, which is here, this first place. To me, it's warm woods, bright tile, creative images, and rustic touches, right? And all this is going to lead up to how I start to think about my startup costs and work on my projections. What is it? How do I celebrate my product? So, you know, vegan, you can still be vegan in my vegetarian cafe, but it's fresh ingredients, ethically sourced, top quality ingredients, and organic when able. Growth and opportunity. So in the beginning, I want to start with limited seats. I'd like to add cocktails, maybe at the beginning, but maybe that'll be phase 2 for a late night program. And then I think that down the road, maybe year 3, I'd like to think about a second location that is to go only. And then finance and money. So the next steps, we've got to work on these projections, right? How am I going to get there? Am I going to try to bootstrap it? Am I going to look for lending sources? I know there's no grant programs available, and we'll talk about that further next week, particularly for startups. And what kind of equity do I personally have? Because that's also part of the process. So if anyone wants to jump in and tell me a little bit about their concept or their vision, or if they found this form to be helpful, I'd love to hear it. No? Guys, I like to talk, so you got to give me someone to talk to, okay? Moving forward. All right. So as you remember, our second, how do I get rid of this, Elena? How do I get rid of my little sherry board on top? Whoops.
We don't see it.
You don't see it? Only I see it. Okay. So in my bigger vision worksheet, I've started to do the work that I'm going to need to do in order to start to create my projections and write my business plan, right? So I have developed a mission statement and talk a little bit about that I'm a vegetarian taco and coconut macaroon cafe, Rhode Island's only, right? And we're going to create a warm and nurturing environment, open for everyone, great offerings with just a little touch of indulgence. So I think we talked about, how do you determine your style? You know, is it a full service restaurant, a limited service restaurant, a quick service restaurant? So I've decided I'm quick service to start. And that to me means the guest walks up to the counter, right, places an order, and they can either go sit and someone will run it out to them, or if they're just taking it to go, they're going to stand in my cool retail corner and hopefully find something else to buy while they're waiting. So what makes me different? And these are all sort of this, again, the vision board exercises from last week. So I'm the first and only combo bakery and taqueria. I'm going to be using always natural ingredients, organic when possible. Sweet and savory appeals to more people. Warm, welcoming, inclusive, right? Everyone's welcome. We embrace everybody. You could be a pink dinosaur, come and eat with me. And we're also a committed community partner, right? So we want to have our space to be available for fundraisers, initiatives, meetings at no cost to a nonprofit. So that is an improvement over some of my competitors, which are really just sort of small taquerias or quick coffee and bakery shops. So then I had to think about, well, who's my target? Who's my target audience? Students all day, right? Downtown workers at lunchtime. After work meeting place, because that goes back to that, maybe I'm going to get my liquor license. Stay-at-home parents treat stop, moms coming and going, or dads, right? You like that? Well, you like treats, Elena. Remote workers office. I'd like to be able to offer that as an opportunity. Ideally, you're going to spend money with me. Starbucks did it in the beginning. You could sign on for free and sit there all day over a cup of coffee. And now it's cyclical. You only get like an hour at a time, and they encourage you to spend more money. So that's another thing to consider, right? Take out on the way home, and then late night munchies. So where did I want to be located? I'm going to get you guys a little bit smaller a minute. So I can, whoops, I keep doing that. So I want to be in a high traffic area with great walkability, right? I want to be near downtown, but I want to avoid the heart of downtown because I don't want to be a victim of that 5 p.m. everybody goes home syndrome. So if I want to stay in Providence, which I think I do, I'm thinking about the new innovation district. There's a lot of activity there and more restaurants and cafes are popping up. But I think, and I keep teasing you with my vision board, but I think that I'd be a great fit for some of the more funky established retail corridors like, Hope Street, Wickeden Street, Ives Street. So I'm looking for a location there. So my startup cost considerations, can I find an existing space or am I going to go white box? And I did my projections on what we call white box, which means it's an unfinished space, right? It's never been developed before. Is there existing business that I can make my own? I'm not having any luck, but I'm going to keep looking. And then I have to really think about my equipment needs. I've got to refine it to needs versus wants. Everyone wants the big, shiny new Alta-Shan power turbo rocket to Mars oven, but do I need that? I don't need it. Maybe that'll be something that I aspire to buy. So as I start to think about my revenue projections, I have to finalize my menu for opening. I need to wrap up my cost of goods calculators to determine my average cost of goods. I have to think about my per person average, which is what PPA stands for, the targets. So right now, based on my menu, I'm thinking it's $8.50 per person during the day, $15 per person at dinner, and $22 per person for the late night, because I've decided I'm going to go for the taco, munchie, coconut macaroon, beer crowd. And then I need to start getting my estimates. All right, here's my vision board. So, getting a sense of materials and what it looks like will help me set a scope of work for a designer or an architect, which is going to help me set my costs. And I wrote a menu, which is helping me drive my cost, my per person average. So we have tacos a couple of different ways. We have our macaroons. We have hot and cold drinks. There's a couple of alcoholic choices there. And I use that as my opening menu to help decide my per person average. Don't you love my cafe? I think it looks great. I want to build this now. So if anyone has a space, I'm ready. Ashish, I'm talking to you. All right, next.
I hear you.
Next steps, right? So now we're going to start up our startup cost calculations. So we have to think about the equipment list, right? The menu drives the needs. And again, we're going back to the wants. The wants we don't want to deal with. That's a problem, right? Small wares and China glass silver go hand in hand with your equipment list. It'll be a different line item as you consider your startup costs, but it also is tied to your menu. Am I using baskets? Am I using trays? Am I going to, splurge on the taco holders? Is that necessary? That kind of thing. Then we have to think about the scope of the space. Is it just paint, or do I need an architect and a designer, which will elevate the cost? And I've sort of decided I'm doing white box for the sake of this exercise. So then I'm going to start to solicit my bids for my build out and my equipment. And they're also going to provide me tools that I'll need to get past the permitting process, which we'll talk a little bit about next week. And then I'm going to do all the research I need to do to gather all my information. I'm going to call my insurance agent. I'm going to call the utility companies, try to get a sense of what has happened in the space. Can they give me a sense of what happens in the community, other businesses like mine per square foot? And now, once I've gathered all my numbers, I'm going to set up my calculator. Now, the next couple of slides are going to be scary. Okay, you ready? So here's the startup cost estimated calculator. And Elena, I think you have a slide to drop in or a thing to share here in the chat, right? So we're actually going to share a working copy of this form with you in the chat. I've got a couple of things coming during this webinar. Here's my startup costs. And you'll see there's 2 blank areas on this. One is the funding, because I haven't really, we'll talk about that next week. And then my average monthly cost, which I haven't updated because I'm still kind of working on my projections. So far, because I dream big, I've got an estimated startup cost of $271,000 for the build out alone. That's just the build out and the equipment. That doesn't include all the other funds that I'm going to need to actually get open. So a couple of months of average cost will be part of that calculation. So you're going to get a copy of this. Is it working, Elena? Can you drop it? It's an Excel sheet. So if it can't happen now, we'll make certain you get it next go round. So does everyone sort of get a sense of what's happening here? Any questions, anyone so far? I like to talk to me. No? Oh, Isabel will.
I like that you mentioned that it's not just sort of a set startup cost, that it's going to be a few months, especially if you have a build out. So those months that you're spending the money, but you're not necessarily bringing the revenue in.
Right. And the average monthly costs can get tied to, like, if you were flipping houses, you might call it your carrying costs, right? And that'll also be determined on your lease program. Like, do you have any free months of rent? So do you not need that right away? But a lot of these other things are going to start right away. So your utilities, once you turn things on, you're going to start to see utility bills, right? Once you need to do down payments for insurance and supplies, you've got to get all the sort of things in place. And those, once they're installed, you have to start making the monthly payment. I usually estimate, like, I like to ask for 2 or 3 months of average monthly costs, if that will fit in my budget. It doesn't always. Okay, so the next step, revenue cost calculations. I need to pull you guys down so I can see this screen better. All right. So I've got a new location, right? So I've written this huge menu and I'm going to whittle it down to my opening menu, which I shared in a previous screen. I'm then going to take those menu items and I'm going to create cost of goods sold for each of the opening items, including pour costs for any liquor, beer, and wine sales, so any alcohol sales. Now I'm going to take some of that back because I've got a long experience in the, don't want to say the bar business, but in running bar operations. So I feel real confident in my ability to make that pour cost of 20%. I'm going to use my menu mix and my desired hours of operation to determine my meal or service periods, right? And what I've done is, when I write these revenue calculations, which we'll share on the next screen, I want to do morning, so daytime, I want to do dinner, and I want to do late night, right? So as I think about it, and I think about the menu mix, I have to think, and my targeted guest, I have to develop a check average for each meal period based on assumed spend. And to help me do that, I need to do my research, demographics, foot traffic, competitors' business volume. I'm currently working with a client who is opening a coffee shop, and he spends time sitting in his competitors' shops, taking notes, listening to the orders being placed, and counting customers, because he's going to use them to help to defend his projections. And then once you've gathered all these numbers, you're going to set up the calculators. I see some stuff in the chat. Oh, there we go.
Maggie, that's pretty interesting. I've never heard someone doing that. It's a good tactic.
He's great. I mean, and he's coming back with really amazing information. So I was, it was great to hear that. Okay, any questions so far, everyone? Because the next screen's really scary. Nope, ready? I know I keep saying that. So here's an overview of my revenue calculations. And I've actually shared this calculator. There's a workbook that you're getting that will have that startup cost calculation spreadsheet that we looked at earlier. And it will have 4 tabs for your revenue projections, which is all sort of the information we need to gather, right, in order to start our projections. So during my daytime, my little restaurant and cafe has 35 seats, including bar seating. I know it's really small, but I did this on purpose so that you could see that there's actually a couple of different revenue streams and a couple of different time periods, which will all go to my total projections. So I have 35 seats. I'm open 7 days a week. On Sunday through Thursday, I assume between the hours of 11 and 3, 35 people are going to come through my cafe. And on the weekends, I think it's going to be double that. I think I'm going to see 70 people per day during the day, right? And that translates to this kind of revenue. Now you notice there's no liquor sales during this time period, right? I also have determined on my cost of goods sold that my average food cost is going to be 32%. And like I said, I'm kind of a superstar when it comes to running a bar. So I'm going to go ahead and assume a 20% bar cost of goods sold. So over the course of the year, between the hours of 11 and 3 or 4, I anticipate generating $139,230 in revenue. Now here comes dinner. So dinner, I think, is between, 4 o'clock and say 9 before we get to late night. So again, I was conservative in my estimates, and with my 35 seats, I only think I'm going to see 35 people each day during the week, and I think I'll see double that on the weekends. But I think that everyone's going to buy a beer, and that my average beer price is, not everyone, 50% of my guests are going to buy a beer, and that my average beer price is $5. So that starts to add the liquor revenue. So my dinner revenue during the course of a year will add an additional $204,750 to it. Now, late night, we all know it's a thing, right? And I also know you're going to eat more and you're going to drink more. So I've increased my per person average based on, hanging out in a couple of places downtown to see. And I assume that maybe you'll buy 2 beers, 50% of the guests, or maybe they'll buy 1 cocktail. And that over the course of the year generates an additional $311,000. And then there's a sheet in this calculator for you that will take and tabulate the entire total across the 4 tabs, the 3 tabs, to give us a total revenue of $655,200 in the course of a year, which isn't too bad for a 35-seat cafe year 1. Any questions, guys, so far? Because we're going to
None, but that was excellent. Thank you for that. That was awesome.
Well, you're going to get the sheet, Ashish, so you'll be able to use it, okay? So now we have to start to think about our projections, right? So we've already broken out our revenue by type, location, and stream. I want to talk a minute about third-party delivery and whether or not that's something for you. It's really impactful to your bottom line. Traditionally, third-party delivery companies keep 30% of the revenue that throws through their system. So if it's a big part of your program, then you really need to think about your business model. If it's a small part of your program, then we'll find a way to carry it in your projections. We're also going to talk a second about projections versus a chart of account setup. So we're going to do projections, or we're going to group some of these categories together to fit them into the draft projection sheet. But I'm also sharing with you a chart of accounts, which is one of the handouts that will give you the kind of detail that's important to have, because it's much easier to track your expenses and find the problem if you have the detail, right? And then once we've gathered all of these numbers, we're going to start our calculator. So on the left-hand side here for my cafe, I'm going to record my food revenue between savory and sweet, because it's really the 2 different revenue streams, but it will give me a total food revenue stream. I always record alcoholic beverage revenue by all 3 types, because if you have a challenge to your pour cost or to your cost of goods sold, it'll be easier to find. And then non-alcoholic beverages, I also carry as a separate line item. And then any other revenues, because people bought some cool swag in my corner. I have really cool t-shirts, by the way. So I know one of the things we want to talk about is some of the category considerations specific to the industry. As you start to set up your chart of accounts and think about how you're going to control your expenses, because it's really important in any food business. You know, it's all about detail for me, right? You've got payroll expenses, an employee related thing that a lot of regular businesses don't have to consider is employee staff meals. You know, is that a program you're going to do? Is it free? Is it 50% off? That kind of thing. And then you have comp food and beverage. Is there a problem? Is there a great guest? You have spillage and waste. Somebody breaks a bottle. If you look at the supplies by different categories, again, you're going to be able to see where your challenges are, because I don't want to say that restaurants are businesses of pennies, but it certainly is a business where you really need to be deep into your spreadsheets to control what's going on. And that's a hands-on thing. You should walk your space every day, the entire house, right? Music and entertainment is a cost that a lot of businesses don't have. Paper and disposables, particularly for your to-go program right now, is a huge problem cost-wise. So you want to think about that. Small wares, you have to buy things that break. Same with china, glass, silver, right? Cash over short is a challenge with bartenders, people handling money. So these are all things just to think about. Okay, breathe, everybody. Can we stop a minute? I'm gonna turn this off a minute so we can look at each other and maybe have some questions. Does that sound good? All right, guys. So here it is. Here's my draft projection based on all the information that I've gathered, right? And it's like, how did I come up with that? Just like Elena said, we made some assumptions and then we tried to verify them the best we could. We did our cost of goods work, so we have an average cost of goods sold. We collected all of the information on rent and utilities, insurances. We've made some decisions about how much money we want to spend each month, year one, for marketing. We've written fake schedules and applied hourly wages to them. But this is much shorter than that cost of goods sold account. This is the kind of work that if here at the SBDC, if we're working with you on the project, this is the kind of thing that we would come up with all the input that you've provided to us, and we'd be able to guide you through some of that, right? So if you notice, I don't take a salary until month 6. And even that's probably iffy. I've decided when I did all my math, and this is a number I like to look at a lot, is I like to control my labor by as a percentage of my sales. So I was able to write schedules that do meet my preferred 18% of top end sales. So that's how I written the schedule, and that's what I've done in my projections. And then I have some basic, there's industry standards for hourly payroll taxes, workers' comp in my industry, my payroll processing fees, because I'm going to use my point of sales provider, and currently it's 6% of my payroll. I don't have any additional outside services to start. I added up all my supplies categories, the paper goods and all those things that you saw on that other chart. And that came to 2% on average of my top end sales. So I carried that. I did all my equipment's new. So I just did $250 as a month as a placeholder for repair. Marketing in the beginning, I'm going to put a little bit of effort in it. So I'm going to do 1.5% of my top end sales after my launch, because I've carried that number already in my startup cost, right? And then I have office expenses, which will cover things like, the music service I have to rent, any TV, that kind of thing, accounting and legal. I have a $3,000 rent in my location, baseline telephone. Utilities, I think, are going to be high, so I'm going to think it's about 3% just because gas and electric are going up. Insurance, because I have liquor liability, general liability, business insurance, and liquor insurance is averaging me $1,000 a month. And then my credit card fees, I'm paying 2.7% plus 10 cents per swipe with Square, who I've decided is my point of sale. So that's 3% all day. Now, so it looks like I'm making money. This is my first pass. So we would then go back and spend a little bit of time refining the estimates, right? And we've actually given you, we have really great, there's another technical partner similar to us called Score that has a really great spreadsheet to help you start these calculations. And that was one of the things that we shared in the group. Okay, you can do it. This is really it, guys. I'm kind of at the wrap up. So I'm hoping we can have a little bit of conversation, because next week I expect everybody to talk to me, because it's really about questions and answers.